I'd like to talk to you about something that's pretty serious here at the beginning of my message. And in fact, I checked it with Pastor Valiente, but there's something I think as a church family we need to talk about. And I need to tell you that there's someone in this church that's been a great hindrance to godliness in your life. In fact, I brought their picture in case they didn't show up, but they did. And ushers, please don't let anybody leave. Okay. This is someone that we hold in high regard. This is someone that we value their opinion very highly. In fact, many of us care about this person very much and want to make them comfortable and make them happy. And yet this is someone who is a great hindrance to godliness in your life. And I'd like to show you their picture. And I have to... But the truth is, there are several things that we have to fight in our life. One is the world, another one is the devil, but the third one is the flesh. And the Bible talks about that many times in many places. Sometimes it talks about it as the old man. How we're supposed to put off the deeds of the old man. We're supposed to fight against the old man. It talks about the flesh. We're supposed to fight against the lust of the flesh, all these things. And the truth is that in our society, life has become all about me. And it's no wonder that there's so much difficulty, so many people that are unhappy. In fact, just to kind of give us an idea of how much our modern life, our philosophy of life, just as people in America at this time, has become self-centered, I want you to take a look at this. And these are all positive, at least things that in the world would be considered positive. Self-efficacy, self-esteem, self-reliance, self-actualization. I can't even read all these, but just watch these. When I looked it up online, an online dictionary, I typed in self with an apostrophe. And there were some 200 words that came out that start with self. It's amazing. And yet, and really, as I was going through this, I tried to pick out the things that were considered to be good by the world. And yet the Bible really has a different view of a lot of that. And that is that man has a problem with self-worship, which is called pride. Man's natural tendency is to exalt himself above God. I wanted to show you a verse here, Romans 1:21, and point out what it says here. It says, because that when they knew God, they glorified him not as God, neither were thankful, but became vain in their imaginations, and in their foolish heart was darkened. Professing themselves to be wise, they became fools, and changed the glory of the uncorruptible God into an image made like the corruptible man, and to birds, and four-footed beasts, and creeping things. The idea here, and we actually talked about this passage about a month ago, is that man has a tendency to turn away from God and towards self. To lift up self, became vain in their imaginations. That means lifted themselves up in their own thoughts. And because of that, they go farther and farther into sin. So man's natural tendency is to exalt himself above God. Another problem with self-worship or pride is that Satan's fall was because of self-worship. Here we see in Isaiah 14 how when Satan fell, his sin was seeking to become like God. He wanted to put himself up to a place next to God or above God. He said, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit also on the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. You know, it didn't just stop there. The first sin of man was tied to self-worship. In Genesis 3:5, it talks about how Satan was talking to Eve and arguing with her about how she should taste this fruit. It said, "For God doth know that in the day ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and ye shall be as gods, knowing good and evil." Telling them, look, you'll be like God if you eat this fruit. And really, the temptation was of pride, exalting themselves up to be kind of like God. Rebellion is also in the Bible considered to be self-worship. In fact, this is a very interesting verse. 1 Samuel 15:3. He's talking to Saul, but he says, "For rebellion is as a sin of witchcraft, and stubbornness is as iniquity and idolatry." Now, it's an interesting thing that they're tying in there, but what does rebellion do? When we rebel against God, we're elevating our own desires above God's. And we're saying, I'm going to do what I think. I think what I want to do is more important than what God wants. And that's why God calls it idolatry. And so we see the problems with self-worship. And with that, I want to point out 4 errors of man concerning self. These are very common errors. In fact, there's things that many of us as Christians, whether we would put it in words like this, or maybe it's just the way we act in our own hearts, errors that we have concerning ourselves. And the first one is that of self-assurance or self-confidence. In the dictionary, it calls self-assurance or self-confidence, and they're very close synonyms: freedom from doubt, belief in yourself and your abilities. Another definition was a firm belief in one's own powers. Now that doesn't, on the face of it, doesn't sound too bad. But what does the Bible say? Here's Deuteronomy 11:1-18. It's a longer passage, but I think if you follow the argumentation in this, you'll see the value of it. It says, "Beware that thou forget not the Lord thy God, in keeping his commandments and his judgments, and in his statutes, which I command thee this day. Lest when thou hast eaten and art full, and hast built goodly houses, and dwelt therein, and when thy herds and thy flocks multiply, and thy silver and thy gold is multiplied, and all that thou hast is multiplied," this is what he's saying you're supposed to beware of, "then thy heart will be lifted up, and thou forget the Lord thy God, which brought thee forth out of the land of Egypt, from the house of bondage." All these things, as you keep his command, as you go along, and God blesses in these many, many, many different ways, and then we tend to start looking away from God. It goes on to say, and it talks about the things he's done for him, "who led thee through great and terrible wilderness, wherein were fiery serpents." These are people of God who had seen these things. "And scorpions and droughts, where there's no water. Who brought thee forth water out of the rock of flint." I mean, water coming out of a rock. Can you imagine? They're seeing this, and yet they're starting to forget God. "Who fed thee in the wilderness with manna, which thy fathers knew not, that he might humble thee, that he might prove thee, to do thee good at thy latter end. And thou say in thy heart, My power and the might of my hand hath gotten me this wealth. But thou shalt remember the Lord thy God, for it is he that giveth thee power to get wealth, that he may establish his covenant, which he sware unto thy fathers, as is this day." It's a very sad thing to think that people who God had blessed in so many great ways and done so many powerful things for would then just start thinking, man, I earned it. We got this great land, we got these cities and all these things because we earned it. And yet, that's the same thing we tend to do. Did we bless ourselves with the abilities that we have? Did we choose to be born in this country? God is the one that has given us everything that we have. And yet we have this tendency as human beings. What are some of the problems with this self-assurance or self-confidence? First, it fails to recognize God as the giver of all good gifts. Also, when we have this self-assurance or self-confidence, we begin to think of ourselves as the source of our blessings.